In 1898, Germany announced plans to build a railway, just one railway, from Berlin to Baghdad, connecting Europe to the Middle East. Britain's response? They engineered World War I, carved up the entire Middle East, created artificial countries that had never existed, drew borders that guaranteed conflict, and unleashed a century of wars that continue today. Over 100 million people have died in Middle Eastern conflicts since 1914. Trillions of dollars spent on wars. Entire countries destroyed. Generations traumatized. All because Britain couldn't allow one railway to be built. This sounds insane. How could a railway possibly justify destroying the world? But once you understand the economics of empire and the power of railroads in the early 20th century, it all makes perfect, horrifying sense. This is the story of the Berlin-Baghdad Railway, and how Britain's determination to stop it created the Middle East we know today, and not in a good way. Before we get to what Britain did, we need to understand why they cared so much about one railway in the first place. In 1898, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled most of the Middle East, gave Germany permission to build a railway from Berlin to the Ottoman territories all the way to Baghdad and potentially to the Persian Gulf. On paper, this seems reasonable. Railways were the technology of the era. Everyone was building them. So what was the problem? The problem was geography and empire economics. Let me show you why this railway was an existential threat to British power. Threat number one, it bypassed British-controlled sea routes. Britain's entire global dominance was based on controlling the seas. The British Navy was the most powerful in the world. Britain controlled the Suez Canal, which was a shortcut from Europe to India and Asia. If you wanted to move goods or armies from Europe to Asia, you had to go by ship. Through waters Britain controlled, Britain could tax that trade. Britain could block competitors. Britain could project military power anywhere because they controlled the shipping lanes. The Berlin-Baghdad Railway changed everything. Suddenly, Germany could move goods and troops from Europe to the Middle East and potentially to India completely by land, bypassing British naval power entirely. Threat number two, it gave Germany direct access to oil. By the 1900s, Britain was converting its navy from coal to oil. Oil was becoming the most strategic resource in the world. And the Middle East, particularly Persia, modern-day Iran, and Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, had massive oil deposits. If Germany built a railway to Baghdad, they'd have direct access to Middle Eastern oil. They could fuel their military and economy without depending on British-controlled shipping routes. Britain couldn't allow this. Control of oil meant control of modern military power. Letting Germany access Middle Eastern oil would end British strategic dominance. Threat number three, the Three Seas strategy would be broken. Britain's imperial strategy was based on the three seas, Cairo, Cape Town, and Calcutta. Britain controlled a continuous line of territory from Egypt, Cairo, through East Africa to South Africa, Cape Town, to India, Calcutta. This gave Britain a corridor control from the Mediterranean to India. The Berlin-Baghdad Railway would cut right through this corridor, connecting Germany to the Persian Gulf and potentially to India. If completed, Germany could challenge British dominance in India, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, which generated enormous wealth for Britain. So this wasn't just about a railway. It was about the entire architecture of British global power. If Germany completed the Berlin-Baghdad Railway, Britain's 200-year dominance would be over. Britain's solution? Make sure the railway never got built. And they were willing to do anything, including starting the most devastating war in human history up to that point. Now, I'm not saying Britain single-handedly caused World War I. There were many factors: nationalism, alliance systems, arms races. But Britain's determination to stop the Berlin-Baghdad Railway was absolutely a major driving force. Here's how Britain maneuvered to start the war. Step 1. Alliance building 1904 to 1907. Britain began forming alliances specifically to encircle Germany. In 1904, Britain made the Entente Cordiale with France, their historical enemy. Why? Because France also feared German expansion. In 1907, Britain made an agreement with Russia, another historical rival. Again, why? because Russia also feared German influence in the Middle East. These weren't natural alliances. Britain, France, and Russia had conflicting interests in dozens of areas, but they united around one goal: contain Germany and stop German expansion toward the Middle East. Step 2. Inciting Balkan nationalism, 1908 to 1914. The Berlin-Baghdad Railway had to pass through the Balkans, the region of southeastern Europe that included Serbia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, and others. This region was ethnically diverse, politically unstable, and controlled by various empires. Britain, along with France and Russia, began supporting nationalist movements in the Balkans. They encouraged Serbian nationalism against Austria-Hungary. They funded revolutionary groups. They created instability. Why? Because instability in the Balkans would make it impossible to build a railway through the region. If the region was constantly at war, the Berlin-Baghdad Railway would never be completed. Step 3. The assassination and the war. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Russia supported Serbia. Germany supported Austria-Hungary. France supported Russia. Britain supported France. Within weeks, all of Europe was at war. Now, here's the key question. Was this assassination convenient for Britain? Absolutely. Did British intelligence have foreknowledge or even involvement? Historians still debate this, but many believe British agents were at least aware of the plot and allowed it to proceed. What's undeniable is that Britain wanted a war with Germany, and they got one. World War I lasted from 1914 to 1918. Over 17 million people died. Empires collapsed. Europe was devastated. The economic cost was approximately $334 billion, about $5 trillion in today's money. And the Berlin-Baghdad Railway? Construction stopped in 1918. Germany lost the war. The railway was never completed as originally planned. Britain had achieved their objective, but the cost was unimaginable, and Britain wasn't done. Because winning the war wasn't enough, Britain needed to make sure Germany could never threaten Middle Eastern access again. So they did something even more destructive. They carved up the entire Middle East and created the borders that guaranteed conflict. In 1916, while World War I was still raging, Britain and France made a secret agreement. It was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, named after British and French diplomats who negotiated it. Here's what they did. They took out a map of the Ottoman Empire and drew straight lines dividing the Middle East between British and French control. These lines had nothing to do with ethnic groups, religious sects, tribal territories, or historical kingdoms. They were literally arbitrary lines drawn by two Europeans in an office in London. Let me show you what Britain and France created. Iraq. Britain combined three completely different Ottoman provinces, Mosul Kurdish, Baghdad Sunni Arab, and Basra Shia Arab, into one country called Iraq. These groups had never been united. They had different languages, different religions, different tribal structures. Britain forced them into one country because it was administratively convenient, and because a combination of territories gave Britain access to oil fields in the north and ports in the south. Syria and Lebanon. France took control of the Syrian region and carved out Lebanon as a separate country when artificially created Christian majority. Why? To create a Christian ally in the region that would be forever dependent on French support. Jordan. Britain created an entirely new country called Transjordan, later Jordan, and gave it to the Hashemite family as a consolation prize because they'd helped Britain fight the Ottomans during World War I. Jordan had never existed as a country before. Britain literally invented it. Palestine. This is where it gets really messy. Britain took control of Palestine and made contradictory promises to everyone. They promised the Arabs independence if they fought against the Ottoman Empire, the Hussein McMahon Correspondence, 1915. They promised the French they'd split the region, Sykes-Picot Agreement, 1916. They promised the Jews a national home in Palestine, Balfour Declaration, 1917. Britain made three different, completely incompatible promises to three different groups for the same territory. They did this deliberately to maintain maximum control and flexibility. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Britain drew borders that gave their ally Ibn Saud control over most of the Arabian Peninsula, creating Saudi Arabia, while carving out Kuwait as a separate British protectorate. Why? To control access to oil and to make sure no single Arab power became too strong. Now, here's the critical point. These borders were designed to create instability. Britain didn't want strong, unified states in the Middle East. Strong states could challenge British interests. So Britain created weak, divided, ethnically fractured states that would need British support to survive and would be too busy fighting each other to challenge British control. This was divide and rule, imperialism perfected. And it worked for Britain's purposes. For the people living in these artificial countries, it was a disaster that continues to this day. So what happened after Britain and France carved up the Middle East? Exactly what you'd expect when you force incompatible groups into artificial countries with arbitrary borders. Let me walk you through the direct consequences of the Sykes-Picot borders. Iraq, the three groups Britain forced together, Kurds, Sunni Arabs, and Shia Arabs, have been fighting for control ever since. 1920, Iraqi revolt against British occupation. 1958, bloody coup and decades of military dictatorships. 1980 to 1988, Iran-Iraq War, 1 million dead. 1990, Gulf War. 2003, Iraq War and sectarian civil war. 2014, rise of ISIS. Every single one of these conflicts traces back to the fundamental problem. Iraq is an artificial state that was never supposed to exist. The Kurds want independence. The Sunnis and Shia fight for control. It's the inevitable result of Britain's borders. Syria. France's borders created a country where the Sunni majority was ruled by minorities, first French colonizers, then the Alawite Assad family. 1946 present. Decades of coups and instability. 1976 to 2005, Syrian occupation of Lebanon. 2011 present, Syrian civil war. Over 500,000 dead, 13 million displaced. The Syrian civil war is partially a result of sectarian tensions built into Syria's artificial borders from the beginning. Israel-Palestine. Britain's contradictory promises create a conflict that has lasted over 100 years. 1947, UN petition plan rejected, led to war. 1948, Israeli independence and Palestinian Nakba, 750,000 refugees. 1967, Six-Day War, multiple intifadas, wars, peace processes that fail, ongoing occupation, and conflict. This conflict exists because Britain promised the same land to two different groups and then walked away, leaving them to fight it out. Lebanon. France's artificial Christian majority state collapsed into civil war 1975 to 1990 when demographics shifted and the sectarian balance fell apart. Over 120,000 people died. Kuwait. Iraq has never accepted Kuwait's independence because Britain artificially separated it from Iraqi territory. This led directly to the 1990 Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and the Gulf War. Now, let's add up the human cost of Britain's borders. World War I, 17 million dead. Iran-Iraq War, 1 million dead. Gulf Wars, hundreds of thousands dead. Syrian Civil War, 500,000 plus dead. Iraq War and aftermath, 500,000 plus dead. Israel-Palestine conflicts, tens of thousands dead. Lebanese Civil War, 120,000 dead. Ongoing conflicts, terrorism, refugee crises, millions affected. We're talking about over 100 million people killed, displaced, or traumatized by conflicts that trace directly back to the borders Britain drew to stop one railway. Let's talk about the economic destruction, because it's almost incomprehensible. World War I cost, approximately $5 trillion in today's money. Britain spent a significant portion of its national wealth fighting a war that was partly about stopping German access to the Middle East. Middle Eastern conflicts, 1920 to 2024 conservative estimates, put the total economic cost of Middle Eastern conflicts at over $10 trillion. This includes direct military spending, reconstruction costs, lost economic productivity, refugee support, terrorism and security costs, Oil price manipulation. The instability Britain created allowed them, and later the U.S., to control oil prices for decades. But it also led to oil shocks, price volatility, and trillions in economic disruption worldwide. The Iraq War alone. The U.S. spent over $2 trillion on the Iraq War, a war that wouldn't have been possible if Iraq hadn't existed as an artificial state created by Britain. Here's the bitter irony. Britain destroyed the world to prevent Germany from accessing Middle Eastern resources. But in doing so, Britain bankrupted itself. World War I cost Britain its economic dominance. By 1945, Britain was broke and dependent on American loans. The empire collapsed. Britain had to give up all its colonies, including the Middle Eastern territories they fought so hard to control. Britain sacrificed its empire to stop one railway. And 100 years later, we're still paying the price. Here's the haunting question. What if Britain had just let Germany build a railway? Think about it. A Berlin-Baghdad railway would have connected Europe to the Middle East through trade and infrastructure. Germany and Britain could have competed economically instead of going to war. The Middle East might have developed as a unified economic region instead of being carved into artificial, conflicting states. The Ottoman Empire might have reformed and modernized instead of collapsing. We might have avoided World War I entirely. No, World War I means no Treaty of Versailles. No Treaty of Versailles means no economic devastation of Germany. No economic devastation means no Hitler, no World War II, no Holocaust. The entire trajectory of the 20th century might have been different. Now, this is speculative. Maybe World War I would have happened anyway. Maybe the Middle East would still be unstable. We can't know for sure. But what we do know is this. Britain's decision to stop the Berlin-Baghdad railway at any cost led directly to World War I, the artificial borders of the Middle East, and a century of conflicts that continue today. One railway. That's all it was. And Britain decided it was worth destroying the world to stop it. In 1940, Winston Churchill, who had been a key figure in British policy during World War I, reflected on the Middle Eastern borders Britain had drawn. He reportedly said, "I think we made a terrible mistake." He was right. Britain's borders in the Middle East created artificial countries that were designed to be weak and divided. Those borders have caused 100 years of warfare, displaced millions, cost trillions, and the conflicts continue today. Iraq, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Kuwait. Every one of these ongoing crises traces back to borders drawn by British and French diplomats who had never even visited the region. All because Britain couldn't allow Germany to build one railway from Berlin to Baghdad. The Berlin-Baghdad railway was never completed as originally planned. Sections of it exist today, but it never became the transcontinental connection Germany envisioned. Britain made sure of that. But the price? The price was the entire 20th century, and counting. If this changed how you understand the Middle East and why it's been unstable for 100 years, hit subscribe. Drop a comment. Did you know about the Berlin-Baghdad Railway? And share this with someone who needs to understand that the Middle East borders weren't natural. They were designed. Because the worst conflicts in history often start with decisions that seemed logical to empires at the time and catastrophic to everyone else forever after. I'll see you in the next one.